we'll just start off by giving you a chance to share a little bit about who you are and why this topic of book banning and revisionist histories is important to you. Why do we need to know about it? Dr. Payne, you want to go first? We'll just go in order.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? First of all, I would like to say that I'm from the Indianapolis Public Schools, and I have been with IPS now. Yes, give IPS a big hand. Thank you. I am blessed to have been with IPS for 62 years now. I just can't seem to leave. Thank you. I started as a second grade teacher, taught second grade for about 25 years, and was quite upset about what I saw going on in terms of children not having materials that reflected who they were, where they come from, and what they must do. And so we started a movement. In fact, in IPS, we say we have gone from a moment to a racial equity movement. But here's what I want to say. If IPS was run like Freedom Schools, every child would be learning. We would have no problem whatsoever.
Good morning, everyone.
We're just going to pause. Just pause on that, all right, scholars?
So my name is Duane Ingram, and I'm honored to serve as the Vice President of Community Affairs for RISE Indy. And this is a topic that's near and dear and important to me and the work that we do at RISE, because books are important, because books tell a story, and books share history, and books make connections. And when you ban books, what you do is try to rewrite history and hide the untold, dirty, uncomfortable truth of this history that's that we have in this country. So banning books is important that we talk about this, because we need to make sure that the stories that are relevant and important to us find ways to be told, and that little black and brown faces like the ones in this room, and like the little black boy that I was growing up in Gary, Indiana, continues to have access to the history that shapes and defines who we are as a people.
Good day, everyone. My name is Dr. Breanya Hogue. I am an assistant professor of literacy and language education from Purdue University. I teach within the College of Education pre-service teachers, how to teach literacy methods, kindergarten through 5th grade, and also graduate students. I teach them qualitative inquiry and community engaged research through the Freedom School. I am the founder and executive director of the Purdue Freedom School program. We're in our 2nd summer, and I use it as a place. Thank you. I'm using it as a clinical research site to really give diverse training, because a lot of the formal training that educators get at predominantly white institutions is really not mirroring what they will go into after graduation. And so Freedom School provides them with a real experience of how to build partnerships with communities and families. Relating to the topic of banned books, with me working with Freedom School since 2008 when I was an undergraduate, in my pre-service teacher program, I thought I was ready to be a teacher until I did Freedom School. And it really just changed my thought and just everything I knew about literacy. And so just learning more myself, just being an advocate and learning how to engage children. Currently, I'm working with my colleague, Dr. Christy Wessel-Powell, that you all heard from this morning at the breakfast, on 2 papers. I want to share those. So one paper is about my experience in implementing a reading of the LGBTQIA picture book with my pre-service teachers, and their reactions to that, some resistance to that. And so I think it will be published in the fall. I want to share that with you all in the Journal of Children's Literature. And so it was a banned book that I shared, and I didn't do it just randomly. It happened because one of my students wrote me. I do a welcoming activity, and they wrote me an email and said, "I wish my professor knew I go by they, them pronouns." And I was like, wow. And so I took that as an opportunity to share this book and do an activity where we could all share our pronouns. My students didn't know that was why I did what I did, but it was really interesting, the response I got. And so I'm publishing about that. And then another paper we're working on, Christy is first author on, is The Dangers of Critical Race Theory for Children, More Than Spots and Stripes. And as you all know, Moms for Liberty is one of the main groups that is fighting for the banning of a lot of children's books. And we're looking at this book series, but in particular this book that was published that misappropriates critical race theory, and some of the terms in it is in the hands of some of the children. And so we are really interested in getting the right information out there and making sure that we educate communities. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for including me in this distinguished panel, and to be on a panel with the legend Dr. Payne is quite an honor. So thank you so much for that. So you can, my bio is in the program, so I'm not going to really go much into that, except I served as a Marine Corps officer where you're sworn to protect the Constitution of the United States. And when you do that, that's with you for the rest of your life. You're always thinking about people's rights and what that means and how they're interpreted. And so that, that is a major driver for me. What is probably not in my bio is that I also served in the Peace Corps. I was in Bangladesh. That's a Muslim country. Outside of the Peace Corps, I taught English in Thailand, a Buddhist country. I'm Jewish. I live in a predominantly Christian country. Religions do not divide us. It is education that I believe divides people, because when we read, we know that increases empathy. We know that helps us to understand. For in my case, I understand what it was like for Richard Wright writing the book Black Boy. I can connect with that character. And we know from Moms for Liberty and other groups, people don't want people to connect, right? They don't want that. As the Vonnegut Library, we cannot name names when it comes to politicians and that sort of thing. We won't do that. But we can Google and we can see who supports our constitutional rights and who does not. And so that's something super important to me. It's a really scary time, locally, statewide, nationally, I start off that I'm a Marine, but first I'm a mother. And being able to read books with your kids and for them to know that they can talk to you about the issues. We were talking earlier about the topic of shame. We don't do a great job in this country of education of our bodies. When you're children, you don't know what's what when it comes to anatomy and what, all of that, the emotional aspects of that. If there was more education, there would be less violence, less mental health challenges, substance abuse, all of these things. And also I'll just say, back to the voting thing, this is a voting year, right? And I always took my kids with me when I voted, even though they were just standing around in there, because the first time I voted, I was really nervous. Like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I could manage the machine correctly. It was a little intimidating to me as a young person, but I wanted to get my kids super comfortable with going and doing it and that responsibility and not just sitting it out. And anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you again for having me.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Fady, F-A-D-Y, very common name in the state of Indiana. And I sincerely apologize for being a little bit late. I had a commitment downtown Indianapolis, and I have to go back after this event to our state house. I have the honor of serving this community as the state senator. I'm your public servant. I work for you, and I'm honored to be on this panel with these amazing thought leaders. I think this topic of book bans is extremely important to be discussed for several reasons. And I'll share by myself just briefly later. But I don't think in a democracy where we cultivate a generation of informed citizenry, that by banning books and raising a generation of people who are uninformed is the way to fuel democracy. And I firmly believe that, as Dr. King used to always remind us and preach to us, you know, ignorance only breeds ignorance and hate. If I don't know you, I might be reserved in the way that I approach you, that I interact with you. I might be afraid of you. I might be concerned about who you are, your background. But let me tell you how uncomfortable we should get to love one another. I love St. Luke's. It's my second home. I've been coming here for hundreds of times. I even joked a couple of weeks ago I was here. I said I'm going to publish a book and call it or title it Door 6. Because I've entered this church hundreds of times, and there's not a single time that I've entered this church from door 6 except it was for something good. So a large chapter of my life and civic engagement has been at St. Luke's and through door 6. So thank you, Shelley, the organizers. I have lived a very uncomfortable life. And I've learned that sometimes we have to invite ourselves to the rooms that we're not invited to the boardrooms where you're not invited to the places and the circles where you feel that you don't belong. When I was a kid, I was intimidated. I was intimidated by my identity. I joked about my name, but I came to the United States as an immigrant. I didn't speak English. I was born, talking about being uncomfortable, but being a global citizen. I was born for a Muslim family. I went to a Christian school for 12 years of my life, and I lived in a Jewish neighborhood. So at an early age, my parents instilled in me the love of others. I can't promote love and compassion and hate someone that I disagree with. I can't have both in my heart. And what opened my mind, what lifted me out of poverty, I was homeless after Hurricane Katrina. I lived in the South. But what lifted me up, what lifted my family up, that I'm blessed before you today to say that I earned 2 masters and a PhD and I teach part-time at IUI, is education. Anytime we ban information, anytime we ban books, it's an indication of a weak ideology, weak political party, weak entity, because oppressors, if they can't stand based on the merit of their ideas, then they revert to methods and techniques to control, to dominate, and to impose their agenda on the masses. So I refuse personally, and in the Senate, over the last 4 years, it's been very challenging for me personally. I was elected in 2020, started serving in 2021. I'm supposed to serve 4 sessions in 4 years. I served 6 sessions in 4 years because we had 2 special sessions. And one of the most influential moments of my 4 years serving in the Indiana State Senate was when I fiercely had to fight against legislation because of Moms for Liberty. They tried to push legislation. It was an agenda. And I will conclude on this because I don't want to dominate the discussion. But there's a larger agenda, global, when I say global, on a macro level within the United States. There's an agenda. That agenda, it begins with few things. One, secure the elections, and it ties with books because if we're not informed, we can't think critically. One, gerrymander to control the outcomes of elections. And that's the biggest political sin in the history of our nation that was committed by both Democrats and Republicans on a national level. I fiercely oppose it. I will fight it regardless of which party brings that, because it's wrong. But once you determine the outcomes of elections for 10 years, what is the next step? They came back to us with legislation to change board races, school board races, to become partisan. So that's the next piece. Well, why is that? Well, we spend $9 to $10 billion annually on education. So now, if the state is controlled, if elected offices are controlled based on gerrymandering, what is the next step? Control education. And that's a form of indoctrination. That's how you actually do it. So they are crying out saying, we don't want our kids to be indoctrinated by all of these corrupt books. But actually what they are doing, they are trying to indoctrinate our kids by washing history out of our books so that we don't speak about slavery, so that we don't speak about these issues. And I fiercely oppose that legislation to politicize school boards and politicize education. And unfortunately, we made it to national news because I serve on the Senate Education Committee. We made it to national news in a very embarrassing way when a teacher from Fishers testified in committee, and one of my colleagues who introduced that harmful legislation, if you remember, it was House Bill 1134, and he said, I don't think you should take a position on isms. So the teacher, what do you mean by isms? So he said, I shouldn't tell my students that Nazism was bad? He said, no, you shouldn't. You should just teach that that was a movement called Nazism. So we made it to Colbert show on a national level for an embarrassing moment. But what is next? Ban books. So we go from gerrymandering, control school boards, control the money for education, and then ban books. And last session, I'm in a faith place. I respect every faith on earth, and I will defend the rights of every person to exercise whatever faith they believe in. But do not use the political system to shove down the throats of citizens from a pluralistic society your specific beliefs. I don't think it's right for a Muslim to shove down people's throats their values, or for a Christian to do the same, or for a Jewish person to do the same, or anybody else. But they came back, and now they want to change our public school system so that chaplains and religious leaders can actually go and indoctrinate kids in the schools. And as of 2 weeks ago, there was a case in the state of Indiana, unfortunately, a sexual assault by one of these individuals that was giving access to these kids in our school system. So all what I'm trying to tell you is that I fiercely oppose banning books. I stand for democracy. I stand for liberation of the mind. I stand for competition in the marketplace of ideas. I stand for teaching our kids that we are a nation that is the best on earth, but we did have some issues. And we should not repeat these issues, whether it is slavery or Jim Crow laws or oppression against immigrants or oppression against our siblings in the LGBTQ plus community or oppression against women. And it starts with teaching people how to read. Thank you.
Senator. Sure. Senator, thanks so much. That's a wonderful segue into us talking about the systemic issues that are at play and how that impacts specifically education. I want to turn to Dr. Payne to share your ideas on what does that look like in a large school district like IPS? How do you handle the selection of books and materials that might be considered to be controversial? How do we balance the need to protect our students from inappropriate content with the need to expose them to diverse perspectives?
Okay. Forgive me for looking at these notes, but I want to make sure I get every point in that I want to share with you. Since we in IPS are very aware that public education, and in particular traditional public education, and more specifically the Indianapolis public schools, is being attacked, scrutinized, invaded, we try very, very hard to make sure that everything is done correctly, properly, and in order, particularly when it comes to a state law such as House Bill 1447, whether we agree with it or not. You should also know that equity and inclusion runs deep through the veins of IPS and is part of our DNA. Our vision is an IPS where student academic outcomes cannot be predicted by race and ethnicity, as it certainly is now. You know who's going to be at the bottom before the test is even given. This has been going on since 1619. So we do not take lightly the state-approved proper selection of books, resources, and materials. We also, and I want you to listen to this very carefully, we also do not take lightly that our students must learn the truth about who they are, where they come from, and how they got here, which is why all employees in IPS must go through a 2-day, 9-to-5 training that helps them understand how systemic racism works, how it works, how it impacts instruction, how it impacts their belief systems. IPS has a district library coordinator, Joseph Troyer, who works closely with the Indianapolis Public Library's Chief Collections Management Officer, Deb Lambert, and in consultation with the Indiana Libraries Foundation and the Indiana School Boards Association. Additionally, I am a trustee on the Indianapolis Public Library Board. Ooh, that's a job. Our school librarians and school leaders are well informed about the law and would not put books and our materials that are obscene or harmful to minors in the hands of our students in the first place, because they aren't available for them to do so. And we certainly don't want anyone to be charged with a level 5 felony. Do you know that they can actually charge teachers with a level 5 felony if they are found with any of these materials? That is totally ridiculous. There is also a procedure for parents of enrolled students. There's a procedure. If there are any complaints from parents, we do have a procedure for the removal of these materials they may consider obscene or harmful. Our district policies charge us to represent a diversity of experiences, opinions, social, and cultural perspectives. And the IPS Office of Racial Equity and Inclusion, which I direct, makes sure that that happens. It is very sad, and it is frightening that we even have to worry about such things as House Bill 1447 or Trump's executive order on combating race and sex stereotypes, or Project 2025, or Indiana Senate Bill 202 that threatens academic freedom, job security, and civil rights in higher education, or House Bill 1608 that bans conversations about human sexuality and forces teachers to out students who request to be referred to by a different name. As Marvin Gaye so eloquently sang, what is going on? But I'm saying, what in the hell is going on? But we know what's going on. We know exactly what's going on. Baba Asa Hilliard calls it the dynamics of domination. And he tells us that in order for one group of people to control another group of people, the first thing you do is erase their memory. To erase or suppress memory is a psychological operation that disables anyone's remembrance of who they are, where they come from, and how they got there. Education is the most powerful mechanism used for domination. So don't be fooled. There may be people who look just like me being used to do the work of those in power. I rest my case.
Isn't she a treasure? I'm so excited I get to sit next to her. Okay. So I'd like to pull from what you said, and let's look at what that looks like. What is happening on all the different levels? So we've got this wonderful panel of representation here. We're going to hear from community, from law, from higher education. Who wants to go next? Who wants to follow that? Bree, let's start with you. Let's start with higher ed. We'll start with higher ed and move to community and law. How about that? Yeah.
We could have stopped right there. Dr. Payne brought up SB 202, and that is in higher ed, Senate Bill 202, that threatens academic freedom. So I just have to say, as a young Black junior faculty, I don't represent Purdue University in my comments, but it's a scary time because my work, when I got hired, I was unapologetic about my agenda of critical race theory, critical pedagogy, and just what I wanted to do. And my department was all on board. They were like, yes, we need you here. We need you. And then now, 2 years in, we have, DEI is under attack, and, some universities are closing cultural centers and just completely wiping out offices of diversity, inclusion, belonging. I will say at the university I work for, we still have those, and I'm happy. They were able to fund our Freedom School, give us some money, the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, Belonging at our university for this summer. But it's just really scary. I'm lucky to have allies that support my goals, and with Freedom School, with me being trained through the Freedom School and now being an assistant professor, I know the power of this movement, and so I use it as a way to do research and think about how can we better prepare pre-service teachers, because the way that we are preparing them for the past years, something needs to change. A lot of these pre-service teachers, predominantly white pre-service teachers that I train, are going into communities of predominantly Black or Hispanic or students of color. And so thinking about the way I teach and that it's being attacked, I have to teach the real ways. I have to teach the real histories. And so I know last summer, our Freedom School, a lot of our interns struggled with the Freedom School way because they were used to being trained the traditional way. And some of the things we found when they went to the national training, I saw a lot of whiteness as a researcher, just, why are they so loud? Why are they dancing like this? Or, just really struggling with culturally relevant teaching practices. And so it's definitely a need, and professors and faculty, staff at universities, we have to resist and find ways to go around and maneuver and really teach the real history. And so after last summer, I started a course to better prepare the graduate students and undergrads that wanted to work with Freedom School. And so I taught a course and really started with the history and also implicit bias and thinking about how they view other communities. And so just really doing that inner work, because you can't just do an experience like Freedom School without really understanding all the different intricacies. So that's just something I do at my level.
Who you are personally and how you fit
Exactly.
in the whole web.
We have a
right?
lot of international students and just things that come up that you wouldn't expect. And our population in West Lafayette, our scholars are very diverse. We have Mandarin and Arabic, and we have a lot of students that actually speak American Sign Language, and just a really different population, which is really good to help prepare students for that. And so I think in higher ed, we just have to do the work. I'm happy to have like Dr. Christy Wessel-Powell. She's tenured, so she has that.
Say hi.
Say hi. When we think about allyship, how do you show up as a junior faculty? She has been showing up for me, having my back. If I can't speak out against something as a new faculty, she's like, I will. And so having that support, those communities, and making sure we support one another is definitely important. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I'm curious to hear from our community leaders about some of the strategies that you have found in being effective for combating banning, combating revisionist histories.
First of all, thank you for this panel and this discussion. And secondly, thank you for not making me go behind Dr. Payne.
Yes.
I got to get my nerves back in check after hearing that wonderful sermon by this piece of history sitting next to me. But before we can really dive into understanding why banning books is an important topic to discuss, I think it's important to understand the literacy behind it and the literacy impacts. And we can't really talk about banning books without talking about the fact that 73% of public school children in Marion County alone, between the grades of 3rd through 8th grade, cannot read on grade level. We need to do everything we can to make sure that all of our children can read at grade level and comprehend the literature and the information that's put in front of them, so we can keep our children, so we can make sure that our children become informed children and an informed adults and an informed workforce and informed parents and informed clergy members and informed teachers and informed whatever the thing is. We got to make sure that they can read. Reading is the foundation to everything. So we have to make sure that, first of all, our children can read. Looking at stats, because, we try to lead with data. And based on 2022 numbers, we're still trying to catch up with our data as information is released. But 70% of incarcerated adults cannot read at a 4th grade level. 70%. All right, and we know that the overwhelming population of those incarcerated look like me, black and brown people. 50,000 adults in Marion County can't read well enough to fill out a job application. This is important, all right? And one out of four black and Hispanic students in Marion County are proficient in English and math compared to their white counterparts. So as we're talking about banning books, let's make sure we can read. Let's make sure we can understand the fundamentals of education so that we can get to books. And I was talking to some teachers yesterday who are new to the profession, and Thursday actually, we're talking about what's something that that they can do as teachers to inspire our youth outside of the classroom. And I think this is important to share today. It's important to note that they can ban a book in a classroom. They can ban a topic in a classroom. They can remove a book from a library, but they cannot take it from my home. They cannot take books from our communities. They cannot take books from our small groups. They cannot take books from our book clubs. They cannot take books from our church groups. They cannot take books from the cookouts. They cannot take books from the places where we are connecting. So they can do whatever they want to do with the State House. But it's our job as the community. It's our job as community leaders, parents, aunties, uncles, matriarchs, cousins, aunties. It's important for us to make books a priority for our children, and not just books in general. We have to make, as a community, books that tell our story a priority. I have a beautiful son who just turned 9 on last Saturday. And I think about a couple years ago, as Target was releasing their Black History Month line, my wife, no matter what the topics are, my wife always buys all the books. And my then 7-year-old son, he got a book about black hair. And he said, "Oh, my hair can do that?" And the world opened to him because he saw himself in a book. That's why books are so important. They tell a story that won't be told in classrooms. Books tell a story that you can't write in a curriculum. Books tell a story that oftentimes if the person giving the information doesn't have that personal connection to the information, they can't share it. They can't, we as black folk, we can give a head nod or a look and a certain gesture, and everybody in the room know exactly what we're talking about, right? That's what's captured in books that share our story and share our experiences. So we as a community, we have to make sure we prioritize ourselves, because they ain't gonna do it for us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Duane. Julie, I wonder if you could speak to how specifically the Vonnegut Museum the museum and library are helping to preserve the integrity of stories.
Yeah, so I guess quickly on the national, state, and local level. So nationally, we are part of a group called the Freedom of Expression Network. And this is the New York Times, the Washington Post, American Booksellers for Free Expression, the American Civil Liberties Union. I think we might be the only Indiana organization that is part of this group. So what happens is almost every day I get an email from this group, and it's like, a book is banned in this state. What are we going to do? Are we going to do a petition? Are we going to work with the Civil Liberties Union? What is going on? What do you want to sign on to? We don't, and most of these organizations don't always sign on for everything, because it's not what they do. They stick to their mission. Our mission at the Vonnegut Library is to celebrate Vonnegut by advocating for free speech and common decency. So that means access to books for us. We decided that we weren't just going to stick with Kurt Vonnegut's books that are banned. We are going to try to make as many banned books available to as many people as possible. So just in May, we took 200 copies of Slaughterhouse-5, Vonnegut's book, out to a town in Virginia where it was being challenged. But we also, I'm happy to tell Dr. Payne, we got this grant money to provide Crispus Attucks High School with copies of whatever banned book you want. To a certain point, but this is what we can do locally. And we have a venue, our building, we have a youth writing center that has books that you just come and you check them out. It's like, I don't even think we look at anybody's ID or anything. You just check it out. And if you bring it back, great. And if you don't, well, then you, like you were saying, Duane, then you have a book, But it is grant money that makes it possible, and individual donations, people becoming members. We have a table. My colleague Yannick is out there with our table today. And if you are not already a member of the Vonnegut Library, we would love to give you a free 1-year membership for your family. So that means you get to come and hang out in the museum anytime you want without, having to pay admission or anything like that. And there are other good things about being a member. But if you're interested, please sign up and take advantage of that. But also, I don't know if we have been in the same room I know we've been in the same room together, but I don't know when, like I had to testify with the Library Federation with the book banning bill, right? And that was a very upsetting experience for me because I did not realize the level to which people will go to intimidate, turn stories around, accuse teachers and librarians of trying to share pornography with students and that sort of thing. And, like Dr. Payne was saying, we've had laws for dozens of years to protect children from things that are harmful to them. So all this stuff you're saying, that is, that's all fabricated in covering some of the things that you mentioned as well, Fady. It's all a kind of control, mind control of people, control of resource. I mean, it's everything. It's scary. But we work locally, and not to mention the fact that we are on Indiana Avenue. We are right across from the Madam Walker Theater, Madam Walker Legacy Center. That's our neighborhood. We know, I never met Kurt Vonnegut. I just devoted my professional life to the study of him. But it's not just him. It is the things that mattered to him. As a World War II soldier and prisoner of war, those constitutional rights matter to him. So we know from his family that having a community gathering space where people can share their stories, that they can pick up a book, they can have a place to go where they feel like they belong. That's what mattered to us. We believe that would have made him proud to have his name on a building like that. One of the 4 original buildings from the late 1800s in that Indiana Avenue neighborhood. So we're honored to be there. We'll take on the fights with the book banners all over the country and definitely locally, and we appreciate, people, all of you, and, John Green, let's not forget, his voice makes a difference in a different way. He can affect business, right? And that certainly is, one of those things that can make change too, and I suspect we'll get into a little bit of that later in the discussion.
Absolutely, especially as it comes to next steps.
Yep.
We sure, please do.
They also do outreach, and so I didn't know Julia, but the curator at the museum is actually coming to Purdue Freedom School to be our keynote for our National Day of Social Action next week. So if you all need outreach programs for all grades or levels,
we can handle all grades. We've got folks who can speak to any age group for sure.
Okay, thank you. We've heard mention of laws and policies from every sector, and so we'll end here with final comments from Fady. Can you speak more? Just give us, expand upon what we've heard mention of regarding current laws, proposed laws that have to do with censorship, book censorship. How does that reflect how we value our society, what's happening in the world?
Do we have 6 hours to cover that?
I know. We need your elevator speech. I'm sorry.
Well, I appreciate it. Last night, I was at an event with the congresswoman who replaced John Lewis. And we were speaking at IUPUI. I teach the life and legacy of Dr. King under the School of Philanthropy, and I teach also under the O'Neill School. And I hope that when I grew up, my dream in life was to become the next Dr. King, and soon after I become a little bit more mature, I recognize I can never be him because you can never fill his shoes, but I can be my own king in my own community. I hate politics with a passion, but I decided to run for public office because when I completed my PhD, I thought all what I need to do is to run to the General Assembly with peer-reviewed research and data, and then that's all what they're missing. If I hand it to them, we're going to fix all problems. But when I discovered, the more that I interned in the Senate, I was an intern in the same chamber that I serve in today, the more that I worked with legendary legislators in our communities, I've learned few lessons, and among those is that no matter what policy solution you have, until you run it through the political system, and the political system is extremely important because they use your money to allocate resources. They use your votes to decide which programs to run. They use your votes that helped elect them, whoever they are, to pass on laws that impact the lives of all of us. So last night when I was speaking with the Congresswoman, we were reflecting on the life and legacy of Dr. King and what did it mean for many leaders afterwards, like John Lewis, to become good trouble. And I remember in relation to laws, I always reflected, I never wanted to run for public office because I was blindly following the legacy of Dr. King, and he never ran for office. And like, why did he not run for office to change laws? But then John Lewis did. And I've learned that it takes inside every state house and inside Congress, plus a large coalition on the outside to preserve the progress of the movement for social justice. And we are members of that community of justice. Our voices can be used either to promote good, or if we are bystanders who are silent, allow book bans, allow repressive modes of laws that they continuously try to pass. My esteemed colleagues over here spoke about several pieces of legislation from 202 to 1134 to others. I'm honored to tell you that I fear no one except God, and that's why I speak truth to power. And I care less about my seat. I didn't run for office to be called a state senator. I ran out of extreme frustration that I was teaching young students at the university how to stand up for social justice. And then when I saw oppression in our communities across the board, when we had a time, I'm not speaking politically, and I hope I respect you if you're Republican, if you're Democrat, if you're independent, that's not my point. But my point is, when we elevate a person to the highest office in the nation to spread fear and chaos and to make us fear one another, I looked in the eyes of my two daughters who were born and raised in the United States, who went to IPS and completed their middle and high school in Washington Township and graduated from North Central High School. When he was elected, my oldest daughter was verbally and physically attacked in school by a group of students who told her, "Go back to the effing place where your dad came from. Our president is going to kick him back." And I looked in the eyes of my daughters when they went through that, and I had to make a decision. Do I preach to my students at IUPUI to stand for justice? I'm not asking to be privileged. I'm not asking to be better than any other human. And I'm not interested in the DEI program just to say that we have a DEI officer or that an organization is promoting a program. My Republican colleagues hate DEI programs because they think it is giving a special group of people special privileges. And all what we're saying, we just want everybody to be treated equally under the law. That's all what we're asking for. We're not asking for privilege. If we're God's children, I don't think God discriminated by creating me and you and everybody else. So why are you using the laws and then using faith to preach discrimination? Can't do that. So I taught my students among the most influential moments of the life of Dr. King. And two that always remind me of my work in the Senate when it comes to laws and opposition to bad legislation, from book bans to politicizing education to changing the 10-year process for professors so that they can be silenced. I remember two moments in his life. Always when I ask my students, what do you think was the most powerful time or speech of Dr. King? Most students would say, I have a dream, or one of these famous speeches. I remind them of two moments that were significant in the life of Dr. King. Remember, Dr. King was not the most liked at his time. And now you read about him and you find every city in America has his name on a street or an institution. But back then he was not liked, he was considered radical. And even within our black communities, he was questioned, and I'm going to recite with you or share with you one of those incidents when he challenged the laws. And some people in our own communities, including our brothers and sisters in the black community, who were asking the question, why are we doing this? One of those moments was during his opposition to the war in Vietnam. And it was one of the most powerful speeches he ever delivered. After he greeted the congregants of the event, he quoted a philosopher, his name is Dante, and he said, "I reserve the deepest place in hell for those who remain silent at a time of a great moral crisis." Let me say it again. I reserve the deepest place in hell for those who remain silent at a time of a great moral crisis. So last night when I was speaking with the congresswoman, she was talking about the same exact pieces of legislation that they're trying to pass over there. And she said, we rolled up our sleeves, we worked, we mobilized, we organized, and we flipped political offices, and we prevented that agenda from moving forward because John Lewis told us to be good trouble every day. And it's one of the most difficult things for a patriotic citizen to challenge his own nation and say, your policies are wrong. But that's the blessings of democracy. That's the blessings of being able to read without fear. I'll conclude with a second stance in his life that I hope is more positive for us to remember the balance of hope and the challenges of the hard work that we need to put to change our societies to what is better. Yesterday, I shared that with Freedom School students who I hosted at the Indiana State Senate to read a banned book for them. Do you remember where Dr. King was a few hours before he was assassinated? Memphis, Tennessee. Do you know why was he there? Sanitation workers. And he concluded his speech by saying, reminding people of the facts, not the fiction, but about the hope and the dream. And he said, we have difficult days ahead. So I'm not sugarcoating it for young people. We do have difficult things that happen in life. I lost a brother-in-law to gun violence. I lost a niece who was 4 years old for cancer. She had a neuroblastoma. I was homeless. I had a poor family who raised me. I came here as an immigrant. Things happen in life. We have difficult things that we experience. So whatever you are going through today, it's okay. You're not being tested. You're being reshaped and remolded to become a better leader. We have difficult days ahead. And I might not be there with you. But I've made it to the mountaintop. And I've looked over. And I've seen the promised land. And we as people will make it to the promised land. And I promise you that promised land of justice will not be defeated by a silly piece of legislation for someone who's so insecure that they think the only preservation of their seat is to ban books, or legislation by any political party that tries to suppress a group of people so that they can rise and they can elevate their political status, or a piece of legislation that divides us in different communities so that they can use us to be items on the menu to stoke fear in their constituency so that they can win elections. Remember, as a student of history, we had struggles for over 400 years. The story of our nation is a story of challenges, of atrocities, of progress, of hope, of determination, of group of people who are resilient, who never gave up, who stood up for what is right, despite how much challenges and pushback they got from the other side. But let me conclude by saying this. We cannot fight for justice by alienating and discriminating or pushing hate on those who we disagree with. We're in the house of God, and we cannot promote love and compassion at the expense of somebody else. This is a bigger space, bigger place, and there's a space for everyone to be loved the same way that God loves us. So I urge you to not be discouraged. Our young brothers and sisters and siblings, be inspired by the likes of Rosa Parks and Dr. King and these amazing thought leaders on this panel who do the work every single day, and they don't care whether their work is on the front page of the newspaper or not. When we are doing other things, absolutely, our leaders inspire all of us, especially our young people. Because the cost of not doing this work is to normalize evil for young people. That's the fear. I can handle debates at the state senate when I hear discrimination. I push back and I don't fear. But my concern, what about our young folks? What if they grow up in a society to think that a one political party is what we call democracy? No, it's not. I fear for our young kids to grow to think that it's okay to discriminate against other people who might look different than you, who come from different places, who might have different faith, who might identify differently. I will never give consent to a hate agenda. I will never give consent at any cost for someone who's trying to destroy what God has created for us, which is love, compassion, justice, and equality. I'll fight till the last second. It doesn't matter what position I have, whether it's my seat or in my classroom or in my own community. I appreciate you for being here. That speaks volumes about you. Again, to the organizers of St. Luke's, to my esteemed colleagues, I love you, I appreciate you, and please continue to be not only good trouble, sometimes you need to be just trouble, and it's okay. And I'll tell you this, I don't condone violence by any way, but one of the statements that I always loved by my brother Malcolm X, by any means necessary.
Aren't we so lucky to be able to be in the presence of these people today? Thank you so much for your closing remarks. And